come on, man. You got to actually come up with some answers here. And none of them, there's no way the answer to this story is there's nothing to see here. And then to Donald Trump himself, who was actually the worst of all of them. And the buck stops with him, and he was the worst of all of them. Donald Trump was left with, you're going to ask me about this when there's a storm? That was Donald Trump's defense.
So recently, Dave Smith went on a podcast with Liam McCollum to share his thoughts on the mass cover-up that is the Epstein story and the most glaring and absurd inconsistencies that the Trump administration is giving us about this right now, the pushback that's resulting from it, and why they're still gaslighting us on this so many years later. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
But I want to actually get your response to Ben Shapiro. He put out a video, and I just wanted to play that quick.
I'm not telling you. They're telling you, people who are members of the Trump administration, people you elected and put into these positions to get you the truth on this matter, are telling you that he didn't, in fact, he was not murdered. He did not keep a client list, and he did not blackmail powerful figures. Okay, right? That is the thing that they are saying, not I. They are saying this. If you're willing to throw that over and claim they're lying, then I'd like to see you present your evidence that they are in fact lying, because I know Dan. I don't think that Dan Bongino is lying to me. I know Kash Patel a little bit. I don't think Kash Patel is lying to me. I don't think these people are lying to me, which means that if somebody else continues to claim that they're lying, they ought to provide their evidence at this point. And now is the point at which the facts on the ground have changed. And so either you ought to shift your opinion based on the facts that have now emerged, or you ought to acknowledge that this was never a fact-based inquiry in the first place.
All right, so there's that.
Wow, I had not seen that. Wow.
Yeah, and his main takeaway seems to be that, like, you know, yes, Epstein was doing salacious things, but I mean, he was just procuring children for himself.
Well, I will say, dude, this is that was, I got to almost give it to Ben Shapiro. That was kind of beautiful. Like when I just watch, I go, I'm impressed, just like on a talent level. The funny thing is that like the media has become so much less of a controlled environment, and there's so many more voices now that I think this pure like propaganda just doesn't work as much anymore, because people, and I hope I play a small role in this and you do and stuff, but that we can kind of poke holes in this and like, okay, let's go through this and just tear apart these arguments. But it was a little bit of a moment where you could see why Ben Shapiro rose up the way he did. I'm not saying it was totally organic, but like, this is why he was like Mr. Conservative for a while. Cause man, he can just like, in the most propagandistic, sophistic like way, he can like present this thing to you where it's almost like, oh, that did ring a little bit compelling. That did sound kind of true. But everything he's doing is so, even when he goes, there are still some questions about how he made his money. Like, I'll allow you that one. This is the least interesting question about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, it is an interesting one, but like, it's not even like the first, like, obviously anybody who knows like even a few things about this would go to something that, like, his intelligence connections, the blackmail operation, like where the videotapes are, who was on them,
Yeah, I'm mostly with Dave here, but I would say that how he made his fortune is pretty pressing, especially in regard to if you uncover from that investigation that it was due to an intelligence service, that he was receiving payments or blackmail payments, that in that case, if that was the answer provided, then that would be a compelling reason to ask that question. I have that question, and it really is in regard to my interest in seeking out who he was working on behalf of, and I think most signs plausibly point to Mossad. Now, also here, when Ben Shapiro had that statement there, he said, if you don't think it's correct what they're telling you now, what Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are telling you now, you present your evidence. Well, guess what? You call it conspiracy theories when we talk about the associations, the points in which they've done a complete turn face on, 180s, talking about the existence of a client list, existence of thousands of hours of kids being molested, the FBI and mainstream media noting that a safe was found with lots of digital media printed with politicians' names on it, plus young X, where X is presumably the underage victim of these crimes. With all these inconsistencies we brought up, and we're just called anti-Semites or propagandists or conspiracy theorists, right? That's what happens. Besides, we're not exactly being armed with all the information we need to make some of those conclusions more concrete because they've been so secretive about this. Not only the Trump administration, but also the Biden administration. And that's what I'd say.
His money. I'll give you the finances. You can have that. Why? He didn't justify why. That's the only one, but he just kind of slides that in there. Like, so in your head, you're just kind of like, yeah, that sounds about right. They got to the bottom of it. There was a little financial thing that was a question or something like that. You know, the first thing I would kind of pick apart of all of this, which I think this is really where, you know, because I am in my core, I'm a Ron Paulian, Rothbardian libertarian. So like the first thing that I think of here is like, this really was some like religion of the state type moment. You know, where you just have this, you know, like all these people, I know you think you're an Orthodox Jew, but you're really not, man, because you have this other religion that actually comes before your own religion, where you just, even the way they sit here and they go, it's just got the tone of like, well, you thought so, but the verdict's in, but we just found out. We just found out that actually there's nothing. And we just, you know, and even at the end, he says something where people want to speculate, but if they can't adjust to the new facts, well, then they can. And what is the fact? The fact is that these people who I just told you, who I know, you don't know them, but you're hearing me say I know them, and that almost feels like you know them. These people, they said so. But the problem is, there are no new facts. No new facts have emerged. The new fact is that Pam Bondi says nothing to see here. The new fact is that they wrote a memo saying, nah, it ain't none of those things.
Yeah, after talking about it on the campaign trail and kind of building quasi-careers out of it. Both Dan Bongino and Kash Patel did that. I think Pam Bondi to some extent too. They couldn't stop talking about it. On Bongino's podcast, he talked routinely about how this would kind of bury the Democrats. Glenn Greenwald's covered that too. You know, there's so many inconsistencies with it. For them to say that now this is the truth, after going back on the simplest things, and it's not just Bondi and Patel, but they have had inconsistencies in their stories too, but it's Alina Habba, Trump's lawyer who he appointed in New Jersey and as part of his administration, went on media saying, hey, there's going to be crazy revelations from these Epstein files. We're going to release the names and it's going to shock the world. You can't just go back on that and say, well, they were wrong the whole time. Well, are you asking them to apologize? Can you explain the discrepancies? There's no attempt even to explain the inconsistencies and discrepancies. Bondi has spun part of it a little bit by saying, oh, you know, we released this video footage saying that he concretely killed himself, or whatever verbiage she used. I think she said definitively. There's nothing definitive about that video. She said that, you know, I'll check on whether he has intelligence connections or whether we learned anything about that and get back to you. And that's all on Epstein. She said those two things right in a row, indicating that we'll probably never hear about his connections to intelligence services. That's for sure. And she also spun that, hey, you know, I talked about all of these videos that existed of Epstein molesting kids. Just kidding. It was just child porn, by the way. But how can you... those two things can't really be confused, even if you have surface level knowledge of what those things are. So Dave's right. There's too many inconsistencies. We're not going to get duped again. Americans were already duped over Russiagate and the Jan 6 hoax and, you know, the cover up of the Biden laptop story, and the Twitter files revealed how much that big tech was collaborating with government to censor and remove users from social media platforms. All these things just in the recent past. And you expect us now in this new media environment where the old talking heads are being, you know, ignored justly so for lying to us so much. And you think we're just going to swallow the same narrative, hook, line, and sinker. I don't think we are.
That's not facts. That's not new information. When you look at it, all you're left with purely is an appeal to the authority of government, is that the government said so. Nothing else has been given here, like objectively. It's not as if they released new information that really destroyed a theory that some people have. They simply just said, you're not getting anything else. It doesn't exist. And none of that's true. And the problem here is that Ben Shapiro can frame it as like, oh, people are speculating about this. But I mean, you could keep speculating, but what facts do you have? What evidence do you have? You know? And the thing is, look, all you need, like, I know I'm certainly not the like Jeffrey Epstein expert. I mean, there's people like Daryl Cooper, Whitney Webb, and people like that who have really done deep dives into the thing. But the whole story, if you know like 6 or 7 facts about it, you're already in a place where there's no question. It's not like the question is this a conspiracy or is it not a conspiracy? The only reasonable question is like, what is the conspiracy exactly here? And yes, there might be some people who jump to one conclusion or another, but like, no, I'm sorry, like the fact that this guy, you have, I mean, again, like if you just pick like a few of the basic facts, which is like he's in the Dalton, the most prestigious, private school in New York City with no background to justify it. He goes from there to Bear Stearns, rises up in this like unprecedented amount of time to like this crazy high level. Like he's like at partner level, like a year and a half into being at Bear Stearns. It makes absolutely no sense. The guy's worth hundreds of millions to billions of dollars, and there's absolutely no record of how he made that money. That simply does not happen. That is absolutely not a thing that happens short of intelligence agencies or criminal activity of some sort. Like,
yeah, that's exactly right. I think Dave's nailing it here. Also receiving about $150 million from Leon Black to do his taxes, receiving a $77 million mansion from Lex Wexner in Manhattan, the biggest private residence in Manhattan that exists, and many more millions of dollars from Wexner for no apparent reason other than just, being his money manager and tax professional. No CPAs even catering to people of this caliber get paid that. It's absurd. And there's just so many lingering questions about how he got his wealth that, it leads us down that rabbit hole of whether he was being paid by intelligence services or blackmail or a combination of the two. I happen to think it's more likely to be a combination of the two. That's why I think it is kind of relevant about how he made his money. And to that extent, I'll differ with Dave a little bit, but I think Dave's kind of talking him into that position that it might be relevant how he made it, given that it's only explainable by the intelligence connection here.
Like that does not happen in just the free market. And then you have, I mean, there's so much more to it than this. I'm just like throwing out a few basic ones.
Yeah.
Then you have the guy all of a sudden is connected to all of the most powerful people in the world, where we know for a fact that he's running a ring of sorts where there's a bunch of underage girls, and he's got cameras in all of his rooms in his apartment in New York City, and in all of the rooms on his private island, which he flies all of these powerful people out to. And we know for a fact that it's gone at least as far as massages in underwear. Like literally, that's Alan Dershowitz is like, I didn't take my underwear off while this young girl was massaging me. Like that's how much is on the record, which to me is a pretty far line to cross. And I'm not like the most conservative guy in the world, but like that's a pretty far line to cross there. And then we have pictures of Bill Clinton getting back rubs from him and all of this. He then
Oh, you act like that's not organic. Like that wouldn't just happen naturally. Doesn't that happen to you, Dave? When you step into an airport, you just sit down in an isolated area and just suddenly get a massage from what looks to be a 15-year-old girl? Come on, Dave. Absolutely. Dave's on the right path here.
Gets popped for whatever the charge was, soliciting prostitution from an underage girl. It really feels like a euphemism, if ever I've heard one. Like, you tried to rape a child. That's a little different than... Anyway, he then gets caught. The prosecutor gives him a sweetheart deal. The prosecutor on record says, Trump's former labor secretary, Costas, who you just mentioned, he says that he was told he was intelligence, and that's why he gave him a sweetheart deal. Then, when he's finally caught again, he dies in like the most secure prison where the cameras malfunction and the guard falls asleep. And this is just, okay, this is just a few bullet points of the whole thing. There's people who go into much more depth. But once you just know that, how is anyone... Like, how could you look anyone in the face and go, you're speculating? You're speculating that there was some type of conspiracy here. I mean, yes, I know the Israeli prime minister slept over at his house and visited him all the time. And yes, I know there's books been written about how Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was Mossad. And yeah, it's like, come on, man.
Absolutely. There's too many inconsistencies, and I guess they just think the American populace, or the distant populace at the very least, that are very skeptical about this story and this narrative in general that they're trying to sell, are stupid. They just happen to think, we're not going to stop. We're just going to stop talking about it now. No, we're going to keep clamoring about it. And we have the advantage now of living in a time that is long beyond the JFK assassination, where they eventually made this go away through a Warren Commission, which was headed, by the way, by the former head of the CIA that JFK forced to resign, Dulles, who couldn't stand in the end because he felt duped by Dulles' excursion into the Bay of Pigs, which was a fiasco designed to draw Kennedy into supporting a regime change operation in Cuba. And, you know, Americans had problems with the Warren Commission findings. Many of them did. Oliver Stone made a famous video about it, right? A famous movie. And things and suspicions lingered, but they did still have more control of the information, more monopoly on the information and the narrative than they do now. This isn't lost on people. We're only a few years removed from the Russiagate hoax, from what I talked about, the Hunter Biden laptop cover-up, the COVID regime and all the absurdities to come from that, the cloth mask, the 6-foot rule, the vaccine mandates for individuals, the stay-at-home orders, the religious worship, restrictions. We all lived through that. We're not going to buy this. So yeah, we demand answers, and Dave's right. The Americans are not just going to buy every aspect of it. Some of it, maybe they will. Some of the explanations they will, but they haven't even explained, the most basic facts about this, including, I think, one of the most damning, which is Ehud Barak staying with Epstein after his conviction for rape, trying to rape a child and sexual deviance, where he got a sweetheart deal. Ehud Barak stayed with them 30 times from 2013 to 2017 and lived in his Manhattan building, his Manhattan residence. He was the former head of Mossad and the former Israeli prime minister. It doesn't make any sense.
You got to actually come up with some answers here. And none of them, there's no way the answer to this story is there's nothing to see here. And if it is, you're going to really need to explain that to me. You're going to need to address like every point that I just made right there and explain how this is not actually a part of something. Like once you know that, the onus is on you. We're not just speculating anymore, Ben Shapiro. Anyone honest would look at this and go, holy crap. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about almost certainly some type of intelligence operation that was predicated on raping underage girls in the United States of America. What type of American conservative is not outraged by this? Like, it's just so, it makes absolutely no sense. And so, like, again, the only logical conclusion here is that Ben Shapiro just thinks this looks really bad for Israel and wants it to go away.
Yeah, and that was generally Trump's attitude too. Why are you asking me a question about Epstein? This is like 24 hours after they released that memo. Of course, they're going to ask you questions about Epstein and the cover-up, the obvious cover-up, which, by the way, we know you don't want us to talk about. Despite talking about, that tragedy in Texas, the natural disaster, I'm sorry, we're still going to talk about this. So yeah, Dave Smith is on point here.
Just literally nothing else makes sense about why he would react in this way. And, hats off to him because he's talented at doing that propaganda stuff. But there was nothing there. There was literally like no point that he made in the whole time. And he's just saying, oh, they came out and said this. I know these guys. Therefore, that's right. You guys are speculating. We've got facts. But tell me which thing that I just said there was not factually proven at this point. I'm not even talking about some of the things in Jeffrey Epstein's past where there's like a bit of speculation going on. I'm talking about literally exactly what we know about it for certain. And if you can't even answer any of those points, you're just not even in the conversation. And anyway,
Yeah, I mean, Ben Shapiro won't even address any of the connections that Epstein had to Israel, including 4 Israeli prime ministers, including the current one, including Netanyahu, by the way, that he introduced to JP Morgan executives. That's often not talked about, by the way. His associations with Ehud Barak, Ehud Olmert, etc. I mean, I don't think that Ben Shapiro's even addressed that. So, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm willing to be open-minded about that. But yeah, it sure seems to be that he wants us not to talk about this because of the obvious associations with Israel that Epstein had. And that's not being covered in the general establishment narrative of this case whatsoever. You hear about the client list sometimes, you hear about the suicide, etc., but rarely do you hear about the connections to Israel, which are concrete. And I've laid out in various other videos, including one that I put out today.
I'm rambling a little here, but I will say, to the point you made before where you were like, this Epstein thing is really hurting Trump. I think you're so right about that. Like, I think this has profoundly changed the way Donald Trump is viewed in the moment right now by much of his base. And number one, it's because of like what I was saying before, it's not just a promise that he broke, it's the most fundamental promise of Trumpism, which is to drain the swamp. And this just completely represents, like, I'm not touching that. What is clearly the closest to like the swampiest thing you could think of. And on top of that, there's just, for the reasons that I was mentioning about the Jeffrey Epstein story, and particularly him, the way he dies in this crazy scenario, Epstein didn't kill himself thing. Like, you were there for that. You can't overstate like how huge of like a meme that was. It's like one of the biggest of our time. And I think that's for the reason that, like, what I just laid out, like, anyone who knows anything about it is like, dude, you can't tell me this doesn't stink to holy heaven. And so it's an equally big moment in a way for anyone to come up without being able to present anything and just say, nope, nothing to see here, when they promise to give you the information.
Yeah, I think he's generally right on this too. I mean, there are a lot of things that dissidents have had issue with Trump overall, just in the recent past. I'll just name 4. Number one, the big beautiful bill. It was putting America into debt to the tune of $5 trillion additional dollars. People like Massey fought against it, got dragged for it by Trump. Trump endorses Lindsey Graham instead. You know how it went. The Epstein cover-up that's happening right now, the decision to rearm Ukraine right now, right after this, I think it's kind of a diversionary measure to try to get people not to talk about this. I think we should talk about both and how stupid both situations are and how absurd both narratives are. And also the recent war with Iran, which, by the way, is not over. There's a ceasefire, but you're going to see clamor for regime change again by Netanyahu in the future when he says, oh, hey, I'm going to say what I've said for the last 30 years. They're weeks away from acquiring a nuke. Kill them, United States. Ditch your own sovereign interests. Ditch your own foreign policy aims. Help us overthrow them like you did, Libya and Syria and Iraq. That's what's going to happen there. So out of all those 4 things, the Epstein cover-up is jeopardizing the rest of Trump's agenda. No matter what you think about it, you are seeing fractures in MAGA right now, and it's prominent people. It's Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Steve Bannon and Matt Walsh and some others, that really think this whole thing stinks. And it is representative of the swamp. So more so than any of those 4 things, and I'll add something else to that, the schism with Musk and revealing Doge to be, a total sham that didn't save money. I think $9 billion codified when the projections were like $2 trillion. Musk is clearly alienated from the administration and pissed about this. And out of all those 5 things, I think this is the most disastrous for the administration so far. So I am with Dave.
And then, also the way they handled it, having that whole stunt with the influencers, all of it's just been an utter disaster.
Yeah. And I mean, like, even in the most recent case, I think the 2024 case, apparently one of Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriends is alleging that he claimed that he was a Mossad agent to her before assaulting her.
This is in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now the cover-up, because also the way they've handled it with Bondi has just been so embarrassing.
Just horrible.
The way they're covering it up is they're saying that she just didn't speak clearly, that she actually was referring to the file but not the client list. But I found this tweet. It was actually Glenn Greenwald that posted it earlier, where there was an earlier clip, not just a clip where she says that the file's on her desk, but there's an earlier clip where she acknowledges that people were helping Epstein, that there were third parties.
A lot of people are wondering, because you said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk, is when can we see them and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims, 200. So we have over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released. by my office.
What kind? Are we going to see who was on the flights? Are we going to see any evidence from what he recorded? Because he had all of his homes wired with recording devices.
Yeah, what you're going to see hopefully tomorrow is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information, but it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay, well, we'll
along with his
that.
co-defendant.
Absolutely, and he had help. That's for
He
sure.
He sure did.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, like a total contradiction.
Especially that last line, and he had help.
Yeah, it's a total.
He had help, but now the help doesn't exist, right? It's just a shift. And, you know, I don't think many journalists will ask her about this. I'm glad Liam found this, but she'll just spin it in some other way if this happens. You know, he had help. And by that, I meant Ghislaine Maxwell. You can just smell what she would respond in this case. They've decided to cover this up, and it's a bipartisan effort. It's something the Biden administration did too. And I think that fact is telling. Despite all the theatrics about, you know, Republican versus Democrat, Harris versus Trump, etc., we still get the same policies in regard to the cover-ups. And there's massive continuity in this area.
Well, contradiction from what they're saying now.
Liam, I can't, dude, I really can't even, I don't know. It's the level of how bad this response has been. It's on the level of the sharp as attack propaganda. Like, you remember just how ridiculous that was on a face? Like, you almost looked at it and you went, wait, really? That's what you're going with? What you're going with is that when you're not watching, he's really good? Like, that was your defense of Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline? Was that, yeah, I know, it's every time you're looking at him, but as soon as you're not looking at him, he's crushing, dude. You have no, like, it was just too ridiculous. And this, I think this might be worse. And on every single level, because look, even her, like, let's go in order here of the whole team, right? So here's Pam Bondi, and that's going to be her defense, is like, oh yeah, they asked me if I had the client list, and I said, yes, it's on my desk. But what I meant by yes, it's on my desk was that there were documents about him that, yes, were on my desk. And it's like, okay, that's the technicality, but come on. Look, we just played that interview. It's not, this is what the whole spirit of everything you were always saying was, we're getting to the bottom of this major thing, and you're going to get all this new information on it, down to the fact that you had this publicity stunt where you brought all these influencers out and gave them binders, and then it turned out to be all stuff that was already in the public record. And then, like, you just, come on, you can't go back on it with just like, no, you misheard me.
Exactly. And she didn't issue any clarification afterward. Once the news of that interview hit the airwaves, right? People saw this. Oh, wait, Bondi, they asked you about the client list. You have the client list, right? She didn't offer any kind of clarification that said, no, I just mean the files. No, that turn face came, 4 or 5 months later. Same thing with other people in the administration. Alina Habba, Trump's lawyer, said that, we'd be shocked by the names released. So it wasn't just Bondi. She's kind of being the scapegoat here. And there's, rumors that Bongino wants to resign because of how Bondi's handled this whole thing. Well, Bongino, you could be a hero. Here's my pitch to you, if you happen to be watching by any chance, is become a whistleblower. Tell us why you think she's bungled this. Where do you think the fallout is? Where do you think the mistakes are? What is being mishandled here? Because if someone just goes down for this in the Trump administration, like Bondi gets fired, but we still won't have answers, that doesn't solve anything. All these people deserve to be fired for this fiasco for sure. But if we don't get answers, it's totally inconsequential to the people that actually care about this, the victims, and to receive justice for being exploited sexually in a sex trafficking ring involving powerful people and powerful politicians. That's what we expect.
Like, no, come on. You signaled the entire time down to this. Then you got Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who have just spent years essentially making a name for themselves largely off this issue. I mean, a few just like it, but like the Russiagate, kind of COVID stuff, and this Epstein thing was one of their big issues. Both of them just on record all the time, down to Dan Bongino, the deputy FBI director, telling us in an interview that he had it on good authority that Epstein worked for Middle Eastern intelligence. So I'm sure, right, it's whatever.
Yeah, that was on Tim Pool's show. He basically said, I have knowledge that Epstein was working for a certain country in the Middle East. And of course, he didn't say it. Well, we'll say it on my show. It was Israel. That was what he was thinking about and dancing around saying, but that's what he meant.
It's Jordan, is really behind this whole thing. Right. Right. It's an Iranian plot.
Qatar,
but so
for sure.
All of you guys, and now Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are literally their defense, which I guess they were the ones who started rolling it out. Their defense is trust me. I'm not saying trust me, but trust me. That literally Kash Patel is up there saying, if I had seen it, do you really think I wouldn't have released it?
That's what he literally said on Rogan. And it's like, yeah, knowing what I do now about your stunning reversal on this issue, I do think that you wouldn't release it, especially because you're an ardent Zionist and would do anything to protect the U.S.'s relationship with Israel. And we've seen that from other comments he's made about how his priorities are, United States security and Israel. He said that openly. That's not something that's just like some conspiracy theorist. Kash Patel has said things like that.
You're like, oh my God, that's what you got? The irony of it, I was talking about this on my show the other day, but I think for a lot of us, I'd imagine you kind of feel like me in this situation because we're kind of in, a similar camp here, or we're in the same camp, I would say. Kash Patel will be like, listen, guys, it's me. And you're like, yeah, but Kash, we don't really know you like that. You know what I mean? Like, I like you, Kash. I always liked you. You know why I liked you? Because you were the guy telling the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. That's the only reason why I liked you. Literally, the only reason why I supported you is because I saw you on several interviews where you were talking about how the crimes that our deep state has committed against our people. Whether it was Donald Trump being framed as a Russian spy or Jeffrey Epstein being this intelligence operation to blackmail people and all this stuff. And you were talking over and over about getting these files out. You weren't talking about that because you were like, it's, we're going to cover it up. I mean, you just can't you can't back that. So as soon as you go back on the whole thing, that was the only reason I like you, I don't like you anymore.
Yeah, he said it all. I mean, what do you expect once you completely turn face from what you were projecting? You acted like the Trump administration would bring about this newfound aura of grace and transparency into the government, into the Oval Office, the whole drain the swamp thing. Yeah, it doesn't exactly look like that's going to happen, and I'm not holding my breath it will ever happen. I know there's some news, Charlie Kirk made a post and Laura Trump had an interview where she said, no, Trump's heard the reception to what was said about the Epstein story and that this was it, and he's going to provide more information. Well, I don't think that there's good, records and historical antecedents to suggest that it will be anything of value. I suspect a new binder that says the Epstein Files Phase 2 with the same documents and perhaps a Warren Commission of some sort regarding the Epstein case that's headed by someone like Mike Pompeo or James Comey or James Clapper. That's what I actually expect from this thing. And then Americans will believe it. It's just so absurd.
That's it. That was the whole appeal of you. And you can't just go like, yeah, dude, but it's me, like you're Ron Paul. And I'm like, oh yeah, dude, it is you. It is the guy I saw in 6 interviews over the last 3 years. That's true. Like, why? This was your whole thing. This is how we know you. You don't have some long track. You wrote that gay ass book about worshiping Donald Trump. What is your other track record here? You know what I mean? Like, you were good on that.
I actually did know he wrote a book like that, but it's hilarious to hear Dave portrayed in such a way, in a way that only Dave can.
That stuff. And so, no, like, I'm sorry, I'm out with him. Dan Bongino, Ben Shapiro could sit here and say, I trust him. That makes me trust him less. I don't know what to say. I don't trust like people in government. That's not the way, that should never be the relationship between a citizen and a government in a free society.
Yeah.
The relationship should never be, I trust them. It's like, no, show me evidence. And then to Donald Trump himself, who was actually the worst of all of them. And the buck stops with him, and he was the worst of all of them. Donald Trump was left with, you're going to ask me about this when there's a storm? That was Donald Trump's defense. That was his defense of his asking the question. The question, by the way, was specifically that Donald Trump's own labor secretary had said he was connected to intelligence. And so you're like, that was specifically the question. And his response was, you're going to tell me this when there's a flood in Texas? You're going to come to me about a child rapist ring that me and all of my cabinet promised to get to the bottom of? The day after we buried it, you're going to ask me this question? Like, it's
Yeah, that's exactly right. And John Mearsheimer made this point is the way in which Trump addressed that question, it seemed particularly defensive and as if he had something to hide. I think a lot of people interpreted it in that way, even if you're a Trump fan. He said, why are we talking about this? What are you talking about? You just issued your cover-up memo the day before. Of course you're going to be asked by it. By the way, it was a very good question by that reporter. I think he was from the New York Times. And, I'm glad he was asked it, but yeah, Trump was very much evasive of it, more so than even Bondi was. So yeah, we're going to still talk about it. And of course, we're asking about it because you promised to deliver on it. And your administration promised to deliver on it. The influencers who supported your administration promised to deliver on it. And by the way, raked the Democrats over the coals for not delivering on it.
Of all the times that Donald Trump has gone back with the media where they asked him a question, I don't think I could think of one where it was more just like, no, dude, he's right. He's asking the exact right question and you have no answer for it. You're always calling out their bullshit. It's like you're the most famous person in the world for some reporter looking at you and asking the dumbest, most unfair question ever, and you just call him out for it. And this time you're like, this guy asked the question. Like, it's not even subjective. It was like objectively correct question, journalist, to ask. And you're going to sit here because you got nothing. It reminded me of the Chappelle Show sketch when he's the president and they're asking about the war. And he's like, well, you asking me about that? I got that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm with Dave Smith here. Look, this whole thing just stinks in so many ways, and that's an understatement because of how far-reaching this stretched into the upper annals of power in the United States and other countries. For the amount of prominent people to be involved in this whole thing, for us to never get answers, is pretty telling. And the most plausible explanations are that all sides are in on it to an extent, covering up for each other, and they can't reveal that Epstein had intelligence associations of some kind, that revealing would be embarrassing to the United States, and most probably that of Israel and Mossad, because, the United States is, if you haven't looked, tied at the hip to Israel and everything Israel wants to do. It's involved in its wars. It's involved in bankrolling its genocide. It's involving in striking its enemies. It's involved in basically funneling American tax money to this country for no benefit to Americans. And that's what the most likely scenario is. Now, Trump can dismiss that, but I don't think this is going away. And like I alluded to before, and Dave addressed a little bit, I think it's going to jeopardize the rest of Trump's agenda. And that's, I think, true whether you like Trump's agenda or whether you have serious issues with it. I, have serious issues with it at this point, and really I wasn't that hopeful about the Trump presidency. I was more hopeful about how he would address Ukraine compared to Biden, but so far, status quo policy there for the most part, with the exception of opening up discussions with Putin. But in so many cases, Trump has failed to deliver on some of his most, passionate promises and some of the cornerstone agenda items on which he fought. And one of those, it wasn't just the Epstein transparency, and that was a big issue, but conservatives in general defended and kind of rallied around causes that were peripheral to that question. For instance, like the exploitation of women in general, in terms of men entering women's sports, that, foils the competitive nature of sports for women. And, things such as that aren't exactly the Epstein case, but they're all wrapped around that overarching topic of, fighting against the exploitation of women. So what kind of conservative is going to look at this and just buy this? I mean, I guess if all you do is watch CNN or Fox News, you might. If you're not exposed to alternative information or, some of the most basic facts about this case that don't add up in accordance with the government narrative, certainly not in the alignment of it, you might never ask. But hey, some of us are watching, some of us are paying attention, and I'm glad to see that both Liam and Dave are. So great episode there. Let me know in the comments below, do you think Dave's on point here? Do you think that this cover-up is bipartisan? Who did Epstein work for? And, what's the most plausible explanation for why they're trying to sweep this under the rug right now? Please leave me a like and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Liam too. He does a great podcast covering this and many other topics. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you do that, click the join button below. You'll get access to all of my videos before they go live on YouTube, and you'll support me and the channel, and I really appreciate that. So until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.